Welcome to Throw Off the Lines, the podcast where we navigate life's changes, explore new horizons, and embrace the journey. I'm your host, Stephanie York, an executive coach with a passion for charting new courses on the water and in life. Ready for some total change? Let's dive in. Hi there, it's Stephanie with Throw Off the Lines. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate anybody who listens to anything I have to say. And today I want to talk about a heavier topic again. It's about bias. And I know my topics aren't light and fluffy and Insta-worthy. They're not about jealousy or cruel. These are things that I'm working on myself. And that's why I'm sharing it, because this is my purpose-driven podcast. And I just wanted to talk about what biases are, how they affect us, how we all have them, and what they can be detrimental to our life. So I just wanted to talk about a personal path to change that goes through biases. And, I found it fascinating how many different cognitive biases are out there, and that, what those are kind of mental shortcuts that shape how we see the world, often without us even realizing it. And I know I have an episode on habits, and that habits make up so much of our lives. Well, these biases that we have in life, that we grew up with, that were given to us by our families, that are given us to our education, the information and media that we consume create and or further our biases, and that we form habits based on biases. I can go to the grocery store and I see that bum sitting by the front door, and I can just apply a bias to him because he's homeless and he's on drugs, and I'm not going to give him money because he's going to waste it. But you don't know anything about that person, and you can walk past that person and feel absolved of any need to help or anything. And I know that's kind of a random bias I'm talking about, but just to give you an idea that our biases shape so many of our habits, and then those habits take up 70 to 90% of our day. And unless we start working on things like critical thinking skills, which I did a whole podcast on because I'm trying to keep my brain healthy by working on my critical thinking skills. That's episode 21. And on episode 22, where I talk about self-perception and others' perspectives, and how you can get better critical thinking skills, and how you can see other people's perspectives, and how this helps you not only in your everyday life, it opens you up to the world. It cracks open some of the biases and some of the media hold that's on you, and the algorithm that sends you down the rabbit holes of information. By addressing these things and trying to work on them, you become a part of a larger society, and you don't become isolated and walled off from society. It doesn't mean that you have to become weak or any of those things, but I think it's really important to start working on how we see the world and engaging in it a little bit more and breaking our habits. And I do coaching professionally. It's an executive coach position, and I need to help people get past their biases when we're talking about sales and working with people and their perceptions. If we're trying to help somebody with something they need and it's a service we provide, we have to get past our own biases and not judge people. And we also have to really form better habits. Habits is episode 20. So if you just log on to throwoffthelines.com, all the episodes are there. They're on Spotify, Apple, all that. So wherever you're listening to this one. The other night I was reading, last night I was reading Adam Grant in a book he wrote called Think Again. And I just love this book. It's heavy lifting for my poor little flabby brain. I'm trying to work my brain back up to better focus, better attention span. And Think Again, he just covers a lot about a scientific mindset and going out and finding information and analyzing things, and not just spoon or eating, piles of sugar, but really chewing on facts and looking at stuff. And it really got me thinking about my own biases when he was mentioning biases. And there's some really great little memes and stuff about it. And, I really want people, I want to start working on addressing, the different biases I might have that impact how I'm talking to people. Because I'm noticing the more I'm working on myself, the more I see things in other people. And then all of a sudden I'm a little bit judgy of, oh, they've got problems they don't even know about. Well, I'm putting a bias on them, and I'm not looking at their lives from their perspective. I'm doing it from my own perception of them. So I just feel like these are really important, and we desperately need to address these topics for our own mental health. And if you are doing anything to work on personal change, to find more purpose in your life, or to just, be a healthier part of society and get yourself out there more, all the different episodes are about things that I'm doing myself. So feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about any of it. So let's jump right in. Have you been absolutely convinced you were right about something before? This is a question I want you to think about, because I've been absolutely convinced I'm right about something, and I've ignored evidence that contradicted me. Have you maybe found yourself instantly drawn to people who remind you of yourself? We often like people who mirror us. These are all biases at work. If you're sure you know something, and evidence be damned, you don't want to be persuaded differently, or you're drawn to people just like yourself and you avoid people that are different than you, these are biases, and they affect everything from who we hire. This is a huge problem in hiring, onto who we become friends with, and the news we consume, to the opportunities we provide to others and the opportunities that are open to us. We often don't see opportunities because of our biases. So let's just dig in. Let's define what a bias is. It's at its core, a bias is a systemic pattern of thinking that deviates from logic and objectivity. So these are mental shortcuts I mentioned before that influence our judgments and our decisions and our behaviors in ways that can range from subtle cognitive distortions to significant societal inequalities. So what I mean by that is we will distort how we see something because it doesn't align with the bias that lives in our minds. And the societal inequalities are, if I'm in a hiring position, and I have very specific examples of this when I've been trying to help organizations hire, we don't know, but we might not interview, or we might not interview as well somebody who we have never seen do that job before, or somebody who's older, or somebody who's not of our own race, because we're not as experienced interacting with those people. So we limit our ability to interview a wide range of people, and we narrow down the pool of candidates to hire, per se. And those biases can be conscious or unconscious. And conscious biases are attitudes we're aware of, like explicitly believing one group is superior to another. That's flat up racism. And there are people that are very proud that they feel that they are superior to another person because of defining marks or things about them that are visible. But much more common and much more insidious are the unconscious biases. I honestly think that the attitudes we're aware of, like explicitly believing one group is superior to another, are very, very, very dangerous. And in these divided times that we live in, they are cause for harm, mass harm. But we want to dig in a little bit more to some of the unconscious ones, like preferences or aversions that operate outside of our awareness, in our subconscious, things that we are taught or things that we believe innately in our soul that we were brought to by, growing up in a certain society. And the fascinating thing about biases is that they evolved for good reasons. I mean, there's a reason our brains are bombarded with, that are constantly bombarded with ideas and things and perceptions, and we have to shortcut through the information. And so, for example, we take in a lot of information, about 11 million bits per second, but we can only consciously process about 40 bits per second. So our brains developed shortcuts to help us navigate the overwhelming world. So think about it. I'm online in the morning. I'm trying to get my work done. I'm trying to do this podcast. I'm trying to do a bunch of stuff. And I've got Yahoo open or MSN, or I've got Reddit or whatever it is, and 11 million bits per second. Videos when we used to have newspapers. Audio where we have playing while we're trying to read. And we can, out of 11 million bits per second, we can only take 40. Our brains have had to survive, create shortcuts to navigate all that information. So these shortcuts worked well in ancestral times, back when we were, just beginning to learn, sticks and stones and stuff, where quick decisions about whether someone was a friend or a foe, that could mean life or death. But in today's really complex world, these same shortcuts can lead us down paths that aren't necessarily good for us. And, take the availability heuristic, for example, which is a heuristic, HEURISTIC, is a bias. We tend to overestimate the likelihood of events that readily come to mind. Like if you've recently read about a plane crash, flying might suddenly seem more dangerous, even though statistically it still remains one of the safest forms of travel. So we watch the news and there's plane crashes everywhere. Or we're going to go to the beach and all of a sudden you remember all the shark attacks. And that availability of recent information makes us feel like the danger is so much more. So understanding biases isn't about eliminating them entirely. That's nearly impossible. That's probably something we could strive to do little by little, but you can't eliminate them completely. It's about developing awareness so that we can counteract their effects when they might lead to unfair or flawed decisions on our part. And it's kind of like undoing habits. Recognizing where your biases are is kind of the birthplace of the habits, and habits run your life. And there's so much more to life and adventure and new thought and excitement and enjoyment that are outside of our habits, outside of our comfort zone. So you should probably go listen to Habits, episode 20, episode 21, episode 22. I highly recommend it. But let's explore some common biases that affect us all, starting with confirmation bias. I'm going to have a whole list of these in the show notes. So you can just go to them and look them up. And then I'm not going to have large descriptions on them. Re-listen to this podcast, but you could go online and Google confirmation bias. So let's discuss some of these that it's perhaps the most pervasive bias of all. It's confirmation bias is our tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs while dismissing evidence that contradicts it. And that's why two people can look at the same data and draw completely different conclusions. We seek out news sources that align with our worldview and interpret ambiguous information in ways that support what we already believe. If I believe in Jesus Christ as the only Savior in the world, and He's the only way I'm getting to God, and everybody else is silly, I could be presented with information that the largest, religion in the world is, say, the Muslim religion, and that those people all also believe, and I can become smug in, well, they're all, they don't understand what I understand, and Christ is the only way. So I'm going to take in information about these other religions, and I'm going to still think they're bad because I only believe this one way. And maybe religion isn't a good example of that, but confirmation bias. We seek out news sources that align with our worldview and interpret ambiguous information in ways that support what we already believe. I could go down, sure, I brought up religion during this podcast. Maybe I should bring up gun rights and politics and a lot of other really scary topics, because a lot of these topics are so confrontational and so full of emotion and angst and anxiety that there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of opinions out there. I'll take vaccinations is another example. There's a lot of information out there that says vaccinations are really good for you. There's a lot of information out there that says vaccinations have harmed people. And I know really incredibly intelligent people who do not believe in vaccines, and I don't judge them for that, but they become smirky and smug when talking about people who feel like, oh, you've got to go get vaccinations. These are smart people who I know have caring hearts and kind hearts, but it's they take this information about how much vaccines and they don't even read it. And instead they say that's just science trying to force you to go get these shots so Big Pharma can make money off of you. So they don't even read it. And all it does is confirm that they are right to stand on their non-vaccination views. And I'm not coming down on either side of vaccinations, but I see these people as really intelligent, caring people, and we don't have a conversation. We don't talk about, well, what do you think about this study or this information? It's just crossed arms, head tilted back, smug smile on their face, and they just do not even take in information. They instead follow a confirmation bias that just says, that just proves to me even more that my stance on this topic is valid, and that the more you try to prove to me, the more I'm just not going to listen. So it's pretty interesting that this particular bias, confirmation bias, creates echo chambers where our views are constantly reinforced, and it makes it increasingly difficult to consider alternative perspectives. To counter this, we should actively seek out diverse viewpoints and approach new information with genuine curiosity rather than looking to confirm what we already think. So I would say to any intelligent person out there, are you walled off in an echo chamber about something? Do you have a confirmation bias about something that you believe in your heart? And I could use vaccinations because I just brought it up. And again, I don't come down on either side of it. I try to educate myself about why are people feeling like vaccinations are bad? Why do people feel like vaccinations are good? And to be a scientist about this, which is what Adam Grant is talking about in Think Again, it's warm up the old brainstem and start taking in new information. Go out and seek out the other views of other people. We have got to start conversations in this country. And the best place to start is, where are your biases? And you don't have to tell anybody you're doing this, because so often when we're in these echo chambers of our biases, especially the confirmation bias, we don't have people around us that we can confront these biases with. So go and do it on your own. Go do your own research. Go out and find things that are the opposite of what you think. Well-written stuff. Read about it. It doesn't mean you have to change your mind, but be a scientist. Don't get stuck in biases, and don't have your whole entire life run by these thought processes and knee-jerk responses. Because who knows what else you're doing that about. So next, let's talk about kind of affinity or similarity bias. We naturally gravitate toward people who remind us of ourselves. So who share our background, our experiences, our traits. While there's nothing inherently wrong with connecting over similarities, this bias can lead to homogenous social circles and workplaces, and limiting our exposure to diverse perspectives, which is critical to this world we live in. It's changing so fast that if we are not open to diverse perspectives and a variety of people, we are going to lose traction, and we're going to be siloed off into our little places. And it's really sad. There's so much world out there. As I started this journey and I started this podcast, I've started going out and meeting large groups of new people, and they are so much fun, and they're so open to talking to people and so wanting to be a part of discussions about things. And it's, it's really, really hard for us to expand our thought processes and be engaged in the world if we're only around people who are exactly like us. And for some people, it's a protective mode. They don't like anybody, and that, if you're going to be that way, that's fine. The rest of us need to break down our biases. So think about, are you stuck in a confirmation bias where everything you digest only confirms your beliefs? Are you stuck in a similarity bias where you only have people around you who are very similar to you in thought, you look the same, you come from the same exact background, The homogeny of the social circles and the workplaces and limited exposure to a diverse perspective is dangerous at these times. We need to be more agile than that. Another one is the halo effect that occurs when we let a positive impression in one area influence our overall judgment of someone. Even in unrelated areas. If someone is attractive or charismatic, and we all know those people, somebody who is just good looking and or has all this energy and charisma about them, we give them a halo effect. We might unconsciously assume they're also intelligent or they're also competent. And it's the opposite. The horns effect works similarly, but in the negative direction. One negative trait colors our entire perception. This happens a lot in workplaces. I mean, I don't know that we're going to ever really get rid of the pretty halo effect where good-looking people they get a pass on so much stuff. Our society is so surface level that way. I don't think we're going to change that. But if you're in a position where you're in charge of people, or if you're in a position on a team, you need to start looking at everybody on that team with an open perspective. Really find out what is their perspective on things and what is your perception of them. Because sometimes you might think that person is really quiet and they don't speak up. They're a different person than you. And if we don't try to reach out to them and get their perspective on things, we're missing half of the conversation. People exactly opposite of you have so much to offer you. You can learn about yourself. But when you're in a work environment and we judge that person as more competent simply because they look a certain way, and we judge that person less competent because they look a certain way or act differently than we do, then we are using biases to judge situations, and we are losing more than half of the perspective. And we're probably missing opportunity to evolve a work environment or a relationship or something that could benefit us because of these biases. Another really big one is a gender bias. It manifests when we favor one gender over another based on stereotypes rather than individual merits. And for instance, assuming a woman would be better at nurturing roles or a man at technical tasks, regardless of their actual skills or interests. And we all know what this means. Gender bias is a nasty fact. I've been passed over for promotions many, many times. I have women in my family who will only hire male professionals. Now, these people are all in the boomer generation. They're in their 70s and 80s. But they always felt that a man was better at being a doctor or a lawyer, and they would never hire a woman, which just flabbergasts me. And I also know that there's a gender bias when it comes to, say, a mechanic or somebody who does a trade that's normally a blue collar, and they think of just men can do that. And so really think when you come up against a situation and you see a man and a woman in it, are you using gender bias in picking somebody? If you're having a conversation in your head about that man has a family at home and he's got 3 kids, so he deserves the job more than that woman who doesn't have any kids, or maybe she's a single mom and she's got 1 kid, he's got 3 and he's supporting a wife, so he needs the job more than she does. It's just crazy, but I still hear that. And then there's beauty bias, which we kind of talked about the halo effect, which leads us to favor those who we perceive as more attractive, often unconsciously giving them attributes, positive qualities. This goes back to my dating episode, which was episode 18, where we might meet somebody and because they're attractive, we give them authority over certain things that we don't know about them. We give them attributes. A good-looking person is going to be perceived as safe and honest and worthwhile quicker than somebody who's not perceived as beautiful. And we give them, competence or trustworthiness. And that's something that, is that maybe one of the biases that you have. Be careful, step back, realize that what that person looks like is just a skin. It's a veneer. It's the shell. It's the person inside and what they bring to the situation that's the most important thing. Also, we have authority bias, causes us to give more weight to information from figures perceived as authorities, like doctors, professors, or experts, even when their expertise isn't relevant to the topic at hand. Now, I agree that an authority, someone who's educated, has experience, has some years on other people, I will give what they have to say more weight, but I'm not going to let them make decisions for me. I'm going to still think on my own. And again, critical thinking, episode 21, you should get back to that. But think about authority. People shouldn't have swaths of authority over your life or cause you to not think on your own. Ageism, huge problem. I kind of fight it myself. I fight it in myself. I keep saying, "Oh, I'm so old. I'm old for that." And I see huge amounts of ageism in hiring, where I find women and men in their 50s who could do a job fantastic. I put them at the top of the list. They have tons of experience. Their personality would fit perfect with the team. And I list from 1 to 8 the people that I've interviewed that are perfect for that position. And the top 3 are women. And maybe number 7 is a guy. All the rest are women. You know what happened? The top 3 were older. They went to the guy and they interviewed the guy. And all the other applicants lived locally. This person lived in another state. They hired the only man on the list, who was next to last on the list, and they paid to relocate him, and he didn't last 3 months. And those women at the top who knew their stuff were a little bit older. And I got to tell you, I struggle getting people hired over the age of 35 into most positions, even when they would be amazing at that position. So ageism involves discrimination or negative stereotypes based on age, whether you're assuming older adults can't adapt to technology or that younger people lack wisdom and experience. It goes both ways. I get really tired of people in their 70s saying, "Oh, those young people just need to get a job and they don't know what they're doing and we're lost without them." And I'm going to tell you, I've interviewed or talked to so many people in their 20s. They're fine. They do not care what you're thinking. I think they are amazing. They have great heads on their shoulders. I am incredibly encouraged by society and how we're going to evolve with this batch of 20-year-olds that we've got going on. I think they're all amazing, hands down, hardworking, thoughtful, and they just don't really care what anybody else thinks about them, and I think that's so healthy. There's also conformity bias. It's our tendency to align with group opinions or behaviors, even when they conflict with our own beliefs. That's why peer pressure works and why it's so hard to be the lone dissenting voice in a meeting. It's really hard to step outside of conformity. Everything in our society has forced us to fit into a group, and we're tribal by nature, and you want to follow along with the group. But if you feel like you have to conform in order to fit in and you don't want to stick your neck out, I completely understand that, but understand that you might be suffering from conformity bias, especially if you're hired onto a job and you have a ton of experience, but you're not really an outspoken person and you've got somebody who has a lot more charisma on the team. Think about how you can address that. Think about how you can get an idea across and float it. Maybe find somebody else on the team that you can buddy with and share the idea with, and the both of you can bring it forward. But conformity bias is very scary for teams to deal with because you can end up down a rabbit hole. It can kill a company. It can kill a startup because conforming to one person's ideas or only following a charismatic leader will not bring out the best ideas and could cause you to sink. There's tons of case studies out there about it. Another one, we're going to get to the last one here. Attribution bias affects how we explain successes and failures. We tend to attribute our success to internal factors like skill and hard work, while blaming failures on external circumstances. For others, we often do the reverse. we attribute their success to luck and their failures to personal shortcomings. So am I judging others on their failures and their shortcomings based on who they are, and they got lucky and that's why they're successful? And am I saying, oh, I didn't get that because of something outside of me? My entire podcast is about working on yourself, taking personal responsibility for your growth, breaking out of your mold, breaking out of things, getting uncomfortable, making changes happen, and not blaming the world for what's going on. So those are a bunch of examples. And then I want to jump into the effects of biases. In the workplace, biases can lead to unequal treatment in hiring, unequal promotion. So if you're a boss and you're in charge of a team or you're in charge of hiring, make sure you take biases off the plate. Really, I mean, they have hiring departments now that take names and any gender and any age possibility off of a resume, and they try to stack resumes based just on skill sets and what's on the resume itself, not any of other things, because that way you're making a decision about the attributes that matter the most, how that person's going to work, what that person's done in the past. And we need to make sure that we are not using our biases, ageism, and other things to undermine our decision to hire people, because it leads to, hiring people that are similar to ourselves. I have this battle with hiring managers and with my clients all the time. Do not hire somebody exactly like yourself. You're trying to hand off the things that you're not really great at in your job. All of a sudden you're busy. You've quadrupled your sales and you need to hire one more team member. You don't want somebody who does what you're really good at. You want to hire somebody who can do and specializes and has strengths in the things you don't want to do anymore. And that person's going to be different than you. You don't want a similarity bias. So biases can result in really poor decision making. And when we filter through our biases, we miss important information. We miss that scientific brain. And it happens all the time in business, in healthcare, in education, in virtually everywhere a decision is made, biases are used. And granted, our brain just wants to use these shortcuts because we don't have a lot of time, but in really important processes like bringing another person on the team, interacting with another person, creating new friendships, dating, we need to make sure that we're not utilizing biases, because we're going to miss out on some amazing things that will really enrich your life and add success to your business. And there's, our biases cause us to misinterpret situations and events. So, we might attribute a colleague's success to luck rather than skill. And that means we undermine somebody and what they bring to the table. Unconscious biases contribute to social divisions by reinforcing stereotypes and prejudice. They create invisible barriers between groups and make it harder to build bridges of understanding. So if you have biases and you're not actively trying to understand them, and you're not using critical thinking skills to form your own opinion, that can disengage your brain and hijack your attention. And then you're contributing to stereotypes and more biases, and then society isn't going to heal. Social media feeds into this by spoon feeding you information that aligns with your biases. It studies you. It's an algorithm. It's AI. And it says, oh, you don't like this. Oh, you never click on these particular people because they are dissimilar to you. So we're never going to show you people who think differently than you or people who look differently than you. And so that's really a scary place to be, because you're not getting information that you may really need to survive and thrive as situations change. So how can you change your mind or think differently or even engage critical thinking skills if you've allowed your brain to be hijacked by an algorithm and you can't? So I want to talk about ways that we're going to be able to overcome them. Innovation and creativity suffer when conformity bias and groupthink take hold. When everyone thinks alike or fears challenging the status quo, if we don't stand up and say, this isn't right, or here's a new idea, here's a breakthrough idea, then we struggle as a society to make changes. And right now, we need to make some changes. The most innovative teams are typically diverse ones, where different perspectives can combine to create something new. And you need that innovation on your team, in your business, and in your life. You need diversity of opinions. So biases also hinder progress towards equality, diversity, and inclusion. And as much as that's trying to be wiped out of our country, equality affects every one of us. Diversity and inclusion, it includes the person in a wheelchair. How do we perceive that person in a wheelchair, or that person who's on crutches, or that person who has maybe they aren't functioning the way they need to? How we perceive them and how we include them in our society is how we're going to be judged. I'm a woman and I work in corporate America, and if I get paid less than the men get paid, which is absolutely the case, then that's not equality. So we can take steps to make these changes. So first, cultivate self-awareness. You're listening to this podcast, so you're self-aware a little bit, and you may be able to say, I have a bias, or I want to start looking for biases. I want to break myself out of that place that I've gotten stuck. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? What evidence do I have? Could I be making assumptions based on stereotypes rather than facts? And secondly, slow down your thinking. Biases thrive when we make quick decisions. By deliberately slowing down and engaging in more thoughtful processes, you're creating a space to tweak your bias, change it a little bit, and then seek out diverse perspectives. I told you, Google the opposite view. You're not seeing anything that's opposite because the algorithms are only feeding you things that are similar to what you click on and what you like. And it's creating a little silo of information that you're being fed, and you're not seeing stuff outside of that. You have to go and look for it. And then read books by authors with different backgrounds and different life experiences, and consume news from different varied sources. And, practice perspective taking. Try to see situations through others' eyes. And this builds empathy, and it helps you recognize when your own perspective might be limited. And then, again, establish clear criteria for decisions before making them. I'm going to hire somebody. All right, I'm going to look at everybody as the same. I'm going to measure them on these 5 skill sets, regardless of their age, their gender, their race. And I'm going to, do this. What are the qualities and skills? And I'm going to measure everybody equal, put them on a grid, and then I'm going to make a decision based off of that. In your personal life, establish a 3-step process that allows you to step back from a situation and ask yourself, what do I think about this situation? Why do I think this way? Is there another way to look at it? And see what you come up with. You don't have to do this, but I will tell you, critical thinking skills are going to become more and more rare as more of our lives get taken over by AI. If you don't start working on these things now, we're going to have a lost opportunity later on. And hold yourself accountable. When you catch yourself making a biased assumption about somebody, whether you're walking by them on the street or you go into a restaurant and you're meeting somebody new for the first time, that first impression, we are using a ton of biases on. Growth happens when we're honest about our shortcomings. And I strongly recommend all the time that you start journaling anytime you're trying to work on yourself, and you can see where the bias is, maybe even what's influencing your bias, and hopefully work your way through it. Use data and evidence to challenge your intuitions. Our gut feelings are often where our biases hide. I don't like that person because I just get this gut feeling that they're bad. Okay, why? Maybe you have a bias against them and a past experience against somebody that looks like them. Or maybe your parents told you not to trust a certain type of person. That person's just going to force me to think a different way. And, Google opposite views and, get other perspectives. And, there's a lot of people who really fight hard. The smarter we are, the stronger we fight for our biases, and we don't want to give up our biases. And so often, the smarter people are, the more shortcut biases they have because they have so much that they're trying to handle and absorb and take in. So they're just going to say, oh, that article about people who are flat earthers. I'm not going to look at that. And maybe that's not interesting to you. I find it fascinating how people can think that the earth is flat. I want to know how these people think, because some of them sound pretty smart. I'm curious how they believe that. And there's people as I don't drink anymore, and I bump into people who drink, and they say things like, "Oh, I could never not drink," and then I've had conversations with people drinking wine. Well, there's that article about how wine is really good for you, and then when I start to send them a link and say, well, here's where that article's debunked, and then I say, all this other information about drinking alcohol, there's no good amount, and all these different nations, countries, and the World Health Organization have all come out saying no amount of alcohol is good for you. But these people, they don't want to read those things. They're just like, oh, that's just more information, because they want to hold on to the truth that they see alcohol is good for them, because they don't want to stop drinking. And I tell them, you can keep drinking all you want. I'm just saying, if you want to educate yourself about your health, you might want to read about this and then keep drinking. I don't want you to stop drinking. I stopped drinking because I don't feel it's good for me. And here's why. These facts and this information is what I took in. And no judgment here, but you might want to look at different perspectives on everything that you're doing and make sure that you're not as biased as you think. So I have biases, and I'm fighting and working on them. And this book, Think Again by Adam Grant, is amazing. And then critical thinking, self-perception, other people's perspectives, all this stuff is so incredibly important. When we reduce the influence of biases, we open ourselves up to new ideas, and we connect more authentically, which is so incredibly important and so incredibly fun. I have met the most amazing people in the last 2 months just by being open to brand new people. I go up and introduce myself, and they're just like me. They all want to be happier. They all want to grow. They all want to have a better world. And when we connect that way with a diverse group of people, we create fairer systems. We don't have to change how we do things, but it's good to see other people. Organizations can become more innovative. Communities can become more inclusive. Individuals can experience more personal growth. When you heal and you can see other people's perspectives and you can see them for who they are, they see you see them. It's huge. It's humanity at its best. The journey beyond bias isn't always comfortable, because sometimes when we wake up to the fact that our biases have hurt other people, then we have to recognize our own prejudices and where we've judged. It can be very humbling. And I've had to address things myself, and I've talked to people about things, and there's guilt, and I talk to them about self-compassion. And if you never approach your prejudices, especially the really harmful ones, and you don't do anything about it, fair enough. But if you're going to come to the table and work on that and say, I don't want to be prejudiced, I want to be open to other people, I want to be open to new perspectives, I got room for you over here. I've got a hug and a cup of coffee and an ear and, baby steps. This discomfort is the growing edge where meaningful change happens. And stepping outside of that little silo that you've created, the one that the AI algorithm's trying to push you back into, is incredibly rewarding. So I invite you to choose one bias we discussed today, and I know we're running on a long podcast episode, and pay attention to how it might be operating in your life this week. I don't care which one I have the whole list in the show notes below. Whether it's confirmation bias in your media consumption, do you only believe this side of politics or that side of politics? Are you only one thing? Well, you know what? Everything you're reading is just confirming your thought process and your ideology. Step outside. Go look up other thoughts. Type in the exact opposite of what is confirming for you and read it and see how other people are reacting to things. Media consumption is being forced on you by an AI algorithm. Take charge of what you're seeing. See a diverse set of opinions and influences, and start to have critical thinking skills. You can still naturally gravitate towards things that make you feel comfortable, but simply noticing that you may have a confirmation bias is the first step. So do what you can and write stuff down in the journal. Could you do small amounts of research to see new and different views on your own bias? Absolutely. And trust me when I say working on your biases can open your life up to a lot more loving kindness as you start to see the world better. Less things are frightening and you become a part of a larger whole society. And it can be scary, and it can be really scary if you completely shatter a bias or a prejudice. But I got to tell you, on the other side of that is you're living an amazing life. And it's hard to do when you're shut down and shut off from others. But when you get a little uncomfortable and fight those biases, the world is incredible. And people are loving and kind. And we have so much more in common than we have different. So I just want to thank you for joining me. And good luck on your biases, and look through the show notes for a list of the different biases, and do your own Google research. There's tons of info out there. And until next time, keep questioning your assumptions and embrace the growth that comes from seeing the world with fresh eyes, and just throw off the lines that are holding you back, and take care. Thank you for joining me on Throw Off the Lines. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe for future episodes and extras, and leave a review, share it with someone who needs a total inspiration. You can also find us on Facebook or Instagram and our Throw Off the Lines website. If you want to be a guest or have questions for the host, sign up on the website and we'll get back to you. Until next time, throw off those lines and live your best life.